So imagine you're sitting on a commercial flight, right? You're descending into this major storm system.
Right. The turbulence is incredibly rough.
Exactly. The cabin is dead quiet. And suddenly the prelate gets on the intercom and says, hey folks, to be totally transparent with you, I'm feeling really insecure about landing today. I'm actually a little terrified.
Yeah. I mean, that is the absolute last thing you want to hear.
Right, because on one hand, sure, you want your leaders to be authentic humans, but on the other hand, in that specific moment, you really just need them to fly the
I
plane.
need competence. You need them to do their job.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into a stack of sources that proves why the modern obsession with, bringing your whole self to work, why that might actually be destroying your leadership presence.
It really is probably the defining leadership trap of the current decade. I mean, we've spent years telling emerging leaders to tear down their professional boundaries, all in the name of vulnerability. And it is actively eroding their internal authority.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to move past those kind of fluffy, feel-good management cliches and really look at what actually works.
And we have a really robust stack of sources for this.
We do. We're looking at several classic Harvard Business Review articles, an extensive 10-year study on executive presence, Daniel Goleman's seminal work on emotional intelligence, and the behavioral frameworks from the book Own the Room.
Right, and the goal here is to deconstruct a concept that the sources call tough empathy.
Tough empathy, which is basically this disciplined practice of balancing genuine human connection with the responsibility to drive really high-stakes, sustainable results, giving people what they need to achieve rather than just what they want.
Yeah, and to understand why tough empathy is so necessary right now, we really have to look at how baseline expectations for leaders have fundamentally fractured over the years.
Oh, absolutely. The research on this is fascinating.
It is. Sylvia Ann Hewlett's research on executive presence tracked the traits most valued in leadership between 2012 and 2022. And the data shows this massive inversion. So back in 2012, rigid forcefulness was the primary trait organizations selected for.
Wow. Just pure top-down authority.
Exactly. But by 2022, that authoritarian model had just collapsed completely.
So let me guess, they swapped out forcefulness for, being a total pushover in the name of collaboration.
Well, not quite a pushover, but the pendulum definitely swung extremely far in the other direction. The new prize trait became a listen-to-learn orientation.
Right, which makes sense in theory.
It does. The research shows modern professionals simply will not tolerate the top-down command and control style anymore. I mean, they demand approachability. They demand authenticity.
Yeah.
But as Herminia Ibarra's research in HBR points out, this creates what she calls the authenticity paradox.
The authenticity paradox, which basically leaves a lot of new leaders completely paralyzed, right? Because they don't know where to draw the line between being approachable and actually having authority.
Exactly. And there's a case study in Ibarra's research about a healthcare general manager named Cynthia that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh yeah, the Cynthia case. So Cynthia gets this massive promotion. Suddenly her team has expanded tenfold. She's overseeing entirely new business units, and the pressure is just immense.
Yeah, the stakes are very high.
And because she wants to be this modern, transparent leader, she stands in front of her new employees on day one and basically bears her soul. She tells them, I want to do this job, but it's scary, and I really need your help.
And, I mean, you can see the logic she was operating under there.
Totally.
She was attempting to build trust by signaling that she didn't have all the answers. But it backfired completely.
Yeah, her team immediately lost faith in her. They were spooked.
But wait, is the research suggesting Cynthia should have just faked it? Like, should she have put on this stoic mask and pretended to be bulletproof even though she was terrified behind closed doors? No, not at all. Faking it requires a level of emotional suppression that eventually just leads to burnout. And honestly, people can usually detect the inauthenticity anyway.
Right, they can smell it on you.
Exactly. So the failure here wasn't her fear. The failure was a lack of discernment regarding her role. Leadership requires maintaining a distinct space. It's this constant tension between approachability, which we code as warmth, and authority, which requires a deliberate degree of distance.
So by dumping her anxieties onto her staff, Cynthia wasn't holding the space for them. She was asking her subordinates to hold the emotional space for her.
Yes. She surrendered her internal authority to the room.
She made her emotional regulation their problem, which, is an incredibly unfair burden to place on a team that is looking to you for direction.
It is. It's totally destabilizing for a team.
So if masking your feelings is a recipe for burnout and oversharing destroys your credibility, we clearly need a synthesis here.
And that synthesis is tough empathy. The term was coined by researchers Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. And it's essentially a framework that ensures your emotional resonance with your team actually leads to results, rather than just fostering this culture of complacency.
Right. The core mechanism being that you empathize fiercely with the people, but you care intensely about the work itself.
Exactly. Empathizing with the people, prioritizing the work.
There is a really fascinating historical example of this in the sources with Elaine Levy, who was the former CEO of Polygram.
Oh, this is a great case study.
Yeah. So he had a reputation as a somewhat aloof, highly intellectual executive, but in the music business, picking the right singles to release off an album is an existential decision for the company.
Right. I mean, it basically dictates the entire revenue model for the quarter.
It's everything. So Levy doesn't sit in his corner office analyzing spreadsheets, and he also doesn't host a touchy-feely listening circle where everyone shares their feelings about the music.
No, he physically enters the melee.
Yes. He goes down to the junior A&R executives, gets right in the mix, and starts arguing passionately about the track list. And he drops the corporate polish entirely. He uses their own colorful language, yelling at them, you bloody idiots, we always have a dance track first.
Which, on the surface, yelling at junior staff sounds antithetical to literally any definition of empathy.
Right. HR would have a field day with that today.
They really would. But we have to look at the underlying behavioral mechanism here. Levy wasn't yelling to demean them. He was identifying with the labor.
He proved to those young executives that he cared about the final result, the music, just as intensely as they did.
Exactly.
And within 24 hours, the story of him arguing over dance tracks had spread throughout the entire company, and the junior staff absolutely revered him for it.
Because he created what Goffey and Jones call horizontal loyalty. He aligned with his team on the frequency of the work itself. By engaging in the debate with that pure, unvarnished passion, he bridged the hierarchical gap without ever sacrificing his executive distance.
I love that. He didn't ask them about their weekends. He fought with them about the art.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this right now, think about your own weekly stand-up meetings.
Yeah.
When you interact with your team, are you trying to build loyalty by just being their friend? Or are you building horizontal loyalty by getting into the trenches and caring about the standard of the work alongside them?
It requires a tremendous shift in perspective. Because the instinct for so many modern managers is to protect their team from stress at all costs.
Yeah, shield them from everything.
Right? And the sources contrast Levy's approach with this dangerous trap called detached caring. We see this really clearly in the case of Neil Fitzgerald at Unilever during the Persil-powered detergent crisis.
Oh, man. The detergent that destroyed clothes.
Exactly. Unilever launched this revolutionary new detergent, but a severe chemical flaw meant the product was literally dissolving the clothes it was meant to wash.
So bad. But instead of pulling the product immediately, Fitzgerald stood by his team of developers. He defended their work. He shielded them from the external criticism because, well, it felt like the supportive, empathetic thing to do for his people.
And years later, Fitzgerald actually admitted it was one of his most profound failures in leadership. He failed to practice a crucial component of tough empathy, which is known as selfless detachment.
Selfless detachment.
Yeah. When a leader is too fused with their team's emotional comfort, they lose their objective discernment. Selfless detachment means having the internal equilibrium to step back and look at the entire field.
Yeah.
And that includes the customer, the market, and the long-term viability of the mission.
Even if protecting that broader mission means making a decision that causes immediate discomfort or disappointment for your immediate staff.
Right.
You just cannot prioritize the temporary emotional comfort of your developers over the reality that your product is ruining the customer's clothes.
Exactly. Tough empathy demands that you prioritize reality over comfort. You have to take responsibility for the outcome rather than simply reacting to the immediate emotional temperature of the room.
Okay, so recognizing that distinction conceptually makes total sense. But how do you practically deploy tough empathy when the stakes are literally existential? Like, if your organization is on the brink of collapse, how do you demand that level of sacrifice without just becoming a tyrant?
Well, for that mechanism, the sources point to the turnaround of Xerox under Anne Mulcahy.
Such a wild story.
It really is. When she took over as CEO, the company was carrying $18 billion in debt. Their credit lines were exhausted, the stock was in free fall, and she was facing immense pressure to just declare bankruptcy.
And crucially, Mulcahy had zero financial engineering experience. I mean, she came up through sales. She couldn't rely on spreadsheet magic to save the company.
No, she couldn't. She had to rely purely on presence, alignment, and internal authority. She leveraged 25 years of relationships within that organization, but she didn't use those relationships to coddle people.
No, she confronted unsupportive executives directly. She looked them in the eye and said, "This is about the company. We are going to save this." She demanded an excruciating standard of performance from her people.
And the question is, why did they accept that pressure?
Right.
Why didn't they just quit in the face of an impossible workload?
Which a lot of people would do.
They would. But it worked because of her authentic credibility. Mulcahy modeled the care she was demanding. She traveled relentlessly, she communicated the brutal facts without sugarcoating them, and everyone in that building knew her commitment to Xerox was absolute. She bled for Xerox.
She didn't just ask them to care, she resonated through the work. And they ultimately avoided bankruptcy, paid down the debt, and multiplied the stock price.
It's incredible.
It is, and the underlying principle here aligns with what the research calls a grow or go mentality, which you see heavily utilized in elite organizations, like the Marine Corps.
Right. The philosophy is that you respect your talent enough to push them to their absolute limits. Coddling an employee is actually a form of disrespect.
Wait, really? Disrespect?
Yes, because it implicitly signals that you don't believe they are capable of handling the pressure of growth.
Ah, I see. But pushing someone to their limit requires an incredible amount of behavioral control from the leader. I mean, if I just walk into a room and start making massive demands of my team, I'm probably just going to alienate them. So how do you calibrate that intensity?
You need a structured framework to maintain that balance. If you lean too hard into the tough and forget the empathy, you just snap into aggression.
Mm.
But if you lean too far into empathy and forget the tough, you slip right back into that vulnerability trap we discussed earlier with Cynthia.
Right.
This brings us to the mechanics outlined in the book Own the Room, specifically this concept of the signature voice.
Yes, the signature voice. The authors argue that true leadership presence is about finding a dynamic, stable equilibrium between two distinct voices. You have your voice for self, which is how you demonstrate your competence, your drive, and your distinct value. And then you have your voice for others, which is how you connect, align, and demonstrate warmth to your stakeholders.
And to master the integration of these two voices, they developed the ACE framework. ACE. It's essentially a diagnostic tool to prevent leaders from slipping into bad habits.
Let's break down the mechanics of this because it's super practical. The A stands for assumptions. This is entirely internal. It's about actively updating your own value proposition in your mind before you ever step foot in a meeting.
Exactly, because if you lack internal authority, if you don't genuinely believe in your own worth or your right to be in the room, you will instinctively try to compensate for that insecurity.
You'll overcorrect.
You will. You'll either shrink into a highly passive, supportive voice, or you'll overcompensate by dominating the conversation with an aggressive, driving voice. Checking your assumptions means deeply grounding yourself in your expertise, so you just do not have to shout to prove it.
It's that quiet confidence that allows you to hold the space without forcing it. So once your internal assumptions are grounded, we move to the C in the framework, communication. This focuses on structured advocacy, but more importantly, it dissects how leaders process incoming information. The framework breaks down 3 distinct levels of listening.
Level 1 is surface listening. This is where, frankly, the vast majority of corporate communication happens. You're taking words at face value, you're nodding, maintaining eye contact. It's polite, but it's entirely transactional.
Right. Level 2 goes deeper. That is issues-based listening. You're actively cutting through the verbal clutter to figure out what the actual logistical problem is.
But the most effective leaders operate almost exclusively at level 3. Emotions-based listening.
Emotions-based listening.
Yeah, it requires an immense degree of presence. You're no longer just listening to the words or the logistical issue. You're listening for the motivation behind the issue. You're reading the nonverbal cues, the shifts in tone, the hesitations.
But how does a leader actually sustain that level of presence? I mean, if I am jumping between 6 back-to-back Zoom calls, trying to read the emotional motivation of every single person on the grid seems exhausting, if not entirely impossible.
It is impossible if you're operating from a state of reactivity. You cannot perform emotions-based listening if your mind is already formulating your rebuttal or stressing about your next meeting.
Right.
It requires stepping out of the noise and anchoring yourself in the present moment, which flows directly into the final letter of the ACE framework. E for energy.
Energy. This is about developing a deep, almost molecular self-awareness of the physical and emotional aura you bring into a space. You have to project a calm, stable equilibrium. Because if your energy is frantic and reactive, you're essentially giving your team permission to be frantic.
Conversely, if your energy is grounded, you become the anchor for the entire room. You dictate the climate.
Managing this energy is, it's a lot like tuning a guitar string. If you crank the tuning peg too tight, like if your energy is too aggressive, relying entirely on your voice for self, the strings is just going to snap under the pressure. You break the connection with your team.
Exactly.
But if you leave the peg too loose, if you adopt that overly supportive voice for others where you're just trying to keep everyone comfortable, the string just flops around, it makes no sound, you have zero impact. You need that absolute perfect tension to actually play music.
That tension is the essence of presence. And, to layer behavioral science onto that analogy, our sources include the work of social psychologist Amy Cuddy. She studies how humans instinctively judge and evaluate one another. And her research proves that in leadership, warmth must always precede competence.
No, that seems counterintuitive to a lot of people. I mean, in a corporate environment, shouldn't my competence be the very first thing I establish?
Evolutionarily speaking, no. Before the human brain cares if someone is capable, it needs to know if they are a threat.
Oh, wow.
Right. If you walk into a room and lead purely with your voice for self, demonstrating high competence but remaining cold and detached, you do not inspire followership. People might respect your intellect, but they will view you as a threat to their own standing. You'll just elicit envy and resentment.
Okay, so if you start off on the wrong foot and people view you as a highly competent threat, how do you rebuild that trust? How do you retroactively inject warmth?
You have to prove that you hold roughly the same worldview that they do. You validate their experience. You show them that you're aligned with their struggles and their goals.
I see.
Once you establish that baseline of warmth, once you prove that you are not a threat, that conduit of trust opens up. Only then does your competence stop being a threat and start being perceived as a gift to the team.
Your competence becomes a tool that helps them survive and thrive, which really brings all of these sources full circle back to tough empathy.
It does.
Validating their experience and proving you're on their side, that's the empathy. Driving the standard of the work forward and demanding their best, that's the toughness.
And it's important to remember, it is not an ideology. It is a daily practice. It requires prioritizing your responsibility to the mission over your own reactivity to the room.
To synthesize this entire journey today, authentic leadership is not what the social media thought leaders claim it is. It's not about oversharing your anxieties, and it is certainly not about being universally liked.
No, it's a highly disciplined, presence-driven practice. It means using the ACE framework to check your internal assumptions, listening on an emotional frequency to uncover true motivations, and tuning your energy to project a stable, grounded equilibrium.
It's about maintaining your internal authority while staying intimately connected to the reality of the people you're guiding. True executive presence is never about the suit you wear or the pitch of your voice. It is measured entirely by what you are able to extract from and provide for the people around you.
Exactly. It's having the discernment to set the agenda and the courage to help your team self-correct when they lose the plot.
Tough empathy requires us to give our teams what they need to achieve, which is rarely what they ask for in the moment. So true.
If you're listening to this and you're thinking about the dynamics within your own organization, we want to invite you to briefly step out of the noise. Just take a breath here and consider your own practice. If true leadership means prioritizing the growth of your people and the integrity of the mission over your own desire for comfort, what is the one difficult truth or the one necessary challenge that your team desperately needs from you right now, that you've been holding back simply because you wanted to remain agreeable?
Stepping into the tension of that question is the beginning of genuine executive presence.
It is where the real work begins. We invite you to bring this insight into your own lived practice. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. We hope this exploration helps you tune your energy, maintain your internal authority, and truly own the room.